the fifth week of our 6-week series called Uncommon Core, Together in Our Differences. And we're talking about those things that are our core values as a church. And hopefully what will become, or what you may hopefully want to become, some of your own core values as well. And we talked about encouragement, that we want to be a church that's encouragement, and I want to be a person of encouragement. I want you to want to be a person who is encouraging, because if you are encouraging, I promise you're going to have a lot of friends, because people need encouragement and they're going to flock right to you, so be an encourager, okay? And then we talked about also answers. I want to be a person that helps people find the answers. I want to be a person that helps skeptics find answers. And I want us to be a church who welcomes people who have questions. And so we want to be that. And then we talked about faith, and that is Paul said, or Habakkuk said first, that the just shall live by faith. And that is that I want to be a person. I want God to do something in my life that can only be explained as a move of God. And I want God to do something in the life of our church that can only be explained as a move of God. Because when that happens, because faith is the difference in Christianity, and that's the way God shows himself different, okay? So we want to be a church where we live by faith. And then Stuart talked about last week, and I appreciate him stepping up, and I appreciate Mason and Stuart always stepping up, and they'll continue to do that. We talked about grace, and man, I tell you, isn't grace amazing? And not only is it amazing, but I want to be a person. I want to be a person who gives to people out of my character, not because or whether or not. I don't want to do it because they deserve it or don't deserve it, or because who they are or what they've done. Okay? Now, how does that, in a church, what does that mean? That we want to be a people who does for people and who gives to people, not because of who they are or what they've done or what they've not done. But we want to be a church who does for people and gives to people because it's the character of our own church, right? We don't do it because somebody deserves it. We do it because we can't help but do it. We want to do it. It's part of our character. So we want to be a church like that. So today, I want to talk about change. I want to talk about change, okay? Change is really important. There's so much I could say about change. But here's what way we'll put it. Change, we want to be a church that's willing to change, okay? We want to be a church that's willing to change. I want to be a person who's willing to change. I want to be a person who's willing for somebody to come in and get my seat where I've sat for the last 30 years, right? I want to be a person who's just willing to change. And I want to be a church that is willing to change. And when we talk about change, and this message is probably going to be a little bit different today, but I hope it works. But when we talk about change, again, we can talk about a lot of different things. But first of all, I want to mention some things about change that I think most of us would agree on, okay? Some things about change that most of us would agree on. Here are some of them. First of all, some change is automatic, okay? Some change is automatic. That is, for instance, anything that grows, that is alive, that grows, changes, right? It changes automatically. There's nothing you and I can do about it. There's nothing we can stop it. We can stop it from happening. But if something is alive and grows, then it automatically is going to change. Another example might be the future. The future is going to change whether we want it to or not. Some change is automatic. It's like the future. The future is going to change. The future is not going to be like the past. It's not going to be exactly the way we think it's going to be. And in the future, the rate of change will actually take place faster than we imagine it is. So some change is automatic. But then not only that, but some change is thrust upon us. You know, it's just we automatically have to change. A wife whose husband has died prematurely. I'm telling you, change is thrust upon her now, isn't it? You know, and think about a man that's laid off from his job. And now he has to move and take his family 500 miles away in order to find work. Change is thrust upon him at some time. So some change is thrust upon us. And then, not only that, but some change is really hard, isn't it? Some change is hard. Ask anyone who's had to change their diet because of some sickness or illness, and they'll tell you that some change is really hard, right? And not only that, but all of us have something in our life. Every one of us here has something in our life that we really want to change. And we've wanted to change for a long time, but no matter how bad we want to change, we do it and we try to do it, and then we have setbacks. And what we've discovered is that we really want to change, but change at sometimes is really hard, right? And then not only that, but some change we just don't like. And to be honest with you, I don't like a lot of change. I know, and I fight it. You know, I really fight it. And I'll talk about that more later. But, you know, the older you get, young people, I'm telling you, you know, the least you like change. You know, we like normalcy. We don't want no surprises, you know. But, and some change we just don't like. Just when I get to know the Windows 7, they come with Windows 10. You know, why? See, I didn't want 8 because I knew it wasn't no good. Just when I learned this system, they changed to another system. When I finally figured out where everything is at in the grocery store, they rearrange the aisles. You know? So I just don't like, you know, sometimes we just don't like change. And probably the most common one that we use today concerning change is this. And it's said in a lot of different ways, but here's one way to say it. We say this: sometimes needed change is never acknowledged, okay? Sometimes needed change is never acknowledged, or sometimes needed change is never, we don't admit it. Let me tell you what we say to someone who has an addiction problem. Here's what we say when we talk about someone who has an addiction problem. We say, you know what? They will never change until they realize they have a problem, right? That's what we always say. They'll never change until they admit they have a problem. Sometimes needed change is never acknowledged. We say that when it comes to somebody who's struggling with addiction. And in fact, if you'll notice, in every recovery system, and we're going to talk about this a lot, in every recovery system that I know of, the first step that someone always repeats, or the first step in that recovery process, is the step where they admit that they have a problem and they need change, right? In every recovery system I know. Let me give you some examples. In AA and NA, here's the first step. We admitted we were powerless over our addiction and that our lives had become unmanageable. Okay? We admitted it. That's the first step in AA and NA. In Celebrate Recovery, the first step, we admitted we were powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors, that our lives had become unmanageable. In Overeaters Anonymous, step 1, we admitted we were powerless over food, that our lives had become unmanageable. Emotions Anonymous, we admitted that we were powerless over our emotions, that our lives had become unmanageable. The first step in changing is admitting that we need to change, isn't it? That's the first step. In fact, if needed change is ever going to happen, one has to admit his need for change, right? I mean, it's pretty easy. If any of us are ever going to change, we're going to have to admit our need to change. And there are several reasons to admit our need for change, but I don't want to talk about those today. I want to focus on, in this part of the message, and it gets sort of a two-part message, and I need you to hang on. And I want to focus on, in this part of the message, just the fact that we can only change, or that change can only come when we admit that we need help. Now, with this in mind, I want to talk about why we want to be a church that is willing to change, okay? This is part, just hang on. I just want to talk about why that we need to be a church that's willing to change. And again, let me get past this part. This part is a little difficult for me, and I'll maybe say a little bit more about that in a minute. But let me just talk about this in a minute, but in a minute we'll talk about you and me as individuals. But But I really want to be transparent here, okay? I just want to be real. I always want to be real, but let me be transparent here for a few minutes. You see, I believe, and here's my thought. Why do I want to be a church? Why do I want to be a church that's always changing? Well, again, I'll be transparent. I believe the reason that I'm here today, I believe the reason I'm in front of you today, I believe that the reason I'm here at this church today is because I finally admitted that I had a problem and I wanted to change. That's the reason I think I'm here. One of the reasons I'm here is because I finally admitted I had a problem and I wanted to change. I believe that one of the reasons that God led me away from the church that I was at for over 18 years, and He led me away from being the pastor at that church, was not just so that I could speak to hunters and fishermen at other places, okay? But I believe one of the reasons that God led me away from that is so I could enter church rehab. Just being real with you. May not be true, but this is how I feel, okay? That I need to enter church rehab. And let me tell you what I'm talking about. Imagine that you own a business or you own a practice or something like that. You own a business or a practice, and every day people tell you, really how great your business is. Every day people tell you how they love you and the business, and every week or month you have regular people that come in and they show up and tell you how they love your business and they love what you do. And when you ask your employees, all your employees, they just think you're the greatest boss in the world. And every now and then you meet with other business people, or you meet with other people in your profession. And you all share stories among one another and about what you do and about your business and how good and how much you like it, all those good things. And then every now and then the Chamber of Commerce, they pick you out, and they make a plaque with your name on it. And you're the business of the month or the business of the whatever. And you put this plaque, on your wall. And then they give you an award. The Daily News, puts a picture. If anybody still reads hard copies, they put your picture online, and you're the businessman or the people's choice. That's what it is, right? You're the people's choice. Everybody wants to be the people's choice, and all that's really good. And then all of a sudden, you're feeling really good about all yourself, and all of a sudden you pick up the spreadsheet. And when you pick up the spreadsheet, you look at last month. And last month, you were in the red. And you know what? And you don't think much about it. You pick it up and you look at the month before that. And you were in the red in that month. And you said, and you look before that in the 3 months back, you were in the red. And you said, wait a minute. I've not looked at this in a while. I need to look at it. And you grab all the spreadsheet for the past month or past several months or 2 or 3 years, and it's 1 month after another you've been in the red. Now you have two choices, right? You could keep believing the hype. Right? You could let the employees keep telling you how great a boss you are. You could let, all those normal customers come in and tell you how much you care for them. You could do all those things. Or you could say, wait a minute. I'm in the hamburger business and I'm not selling any hamburgers. Right? And then I have to admit that I've got to change. Y'all know what I'm talking about? You follow me? All right. Well, what seems to have happened, and again, this is not comfortable for me, so just hang on. What seems to have happened for the past several years, and even decades, is that we as pastors, not everybody, we as pastors and church leaders were sort of sold this bill of goods, okay? We're sort of sold this bill of goods. Someone would tell you how good the sermon was. Someone would leave and say, man, I really felt the presence of the Lord in the church house. Right? Man, wasn't the offering good? We built schools. big buildings. We baptized children, which is wonderful. Families would leave other churches because we were so good, and they would come to where we were at. And us pastors, we would go to conferences in three-piece suits. I can remember, I was the one. See, it's me. It ain't you, it's me. And we shared business cards. It was the church version of the Chamber of Commerce. You know? And we shared business cards. And we were too prideful to tell everybody, you know what? It's tough. And we stink. And all these other things. And we tell each other how wonderful things were. And we did that. And I'm not saying that I or our churches or other churches, I'm not saying we didn't have success. I'm not saying that. But we would do that, all that. But then what happened to me, and this is what this is all about, what happened to me and why I'm here, is the Lord, when I went into church rehab over the past 7 or 8 years, the Lord set me down and detoxed me. And he gave me the spreadsheet. And you know what the spreadsheet said, don't you? I mean, you know. If you've been coming here for a long time, you know what it said. I've told you ad nauseum what it said. It said, you know what? No matter where you go, 80 to 85% of the people in the nation don't go to church anywhere. In the Bible Belt, in the Bible Belt. In not the Bible Belt, not the Bible Belt. But God, they told me how good my sermon was. But God, don't you know we felt the Spirit? Don't you know that Jimmy and the choir, all this stuff was really good. Anyway, and God was saying, but Gary, you're in the hamburger business. And when you look at the spreadsheet, you ain't selling no hamburgers. You see, it's okay when churches like mine and like yours or wherever you may go, whatever, it's okay that we build buildings and okay we have good offerings and it's okay we do all those things. But you know what we sell? We sell what Jesus said we're to sell. And you know what that is? We're to make disciples. That's our hamburger. And all these other things can be fine. But if we're not selling hamburgers, then once again, we can ignore all that, or we can admit that we had a problem. And we can decide to change, right? Now this is part of it. Let me tell you why we're here as a church. We're here, this is our mission statement as a church. We're here to make a significant impact in the 85% of the unchurched in our area. That's why we're here. Anybody wants to know what our burger is? That's what our burger is. We're here to make a significant impact in the 85% of the unchurched in our area. But in order for that to begin to happen, what I had to do is I had to admit I had a problem and I wanted to change. It was my recovery process that I wanted to change. And I need you to know that if this is your church, if you're making this your church, if you made this your church, and I've said this before, some of you older folks, if you're going through the midlife crisis and you want a tattoo, this is the tattoo to get. So when somebody says, what are you all about? We can say, man, we're here to make a significant impact in the 85% of the unchurched in our area. And what I need to make sure that we don't do, and you need to help me make sure that we don't do, and we're not here yet. We're not there yet, I promise you. But we need to make sure, you and I need to make sure, that we don't get distracted into hot dogs or anything else, but we understand where our hamburger is. Okay? That's why we need to be a church that's always changing. Because I believe if we would have been willing to change, and again, some of you who don't know me, I started doing this when I was 16, and that don't mean nothing. That just means all I know. I've seen church, how it was done over the past few decades. And I really believe if we would have been willing to change, Because, see, us older folks, we don't want to change. And let me say this before I go on to something better, is this. If you're around my age, 29, 30, let me tell you, if you're here and you're around my age, you are awesome. Okay? You're awesome. Because people, I had to go through rehab to be able to change, all right? Maybe you don't. But if you're here and you're making this place your church, and you're around my age, a little younger, a little older, you're awesome. Because you're willing to change in order to, and realize that maybe what we did didn't work. All right, you get that? Get it? Got it? Good. Okay. But here's what I want to tell you, and I'm glad I'm past that. That didn't just happen to me. Admitting those things just didn't happen to me as a pastor or a church leader. Admitting that I needed to change, admitting that I was powerless, just didn't happen to me as a pastor or leader. It actually happened to me as a Christian. It happened to me as a Christian. Many of you heard me talk about the questions that I began to ask God. I began to question God. Again, I was raised in church all my life, and then I began to be a church leader even at 16 years of age. And, I always told some things. I didn't want to, whatever. But again, about 10 years ago, roughly now, I began to ask questions to God that I never thought I was allowed to ask. I began to question things. And again, some of you heard this, that one of the things that changed my life, or the number one thing that changed my life, was this. It's where Jesus said this. He said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, or are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Okay? Now, I've heard that verse ever since I was a kid. All right? So when I started sort of questioning, I went through rehab, church rehab, I said, "Lord, you said this." In fact, I should have made this in like red letters, because this is red letter stuff right here. And Jesus said, "Come unto me, all you who are weary, you're tired, and you're burdened." And he said, "I'm going to give you what? Rest. Rest." And he said, "Take my yoke." You know what a yoke is, right? Two oxen are side by side, and they have a yoke across where they're pulling side by side. He says, "Take my yoke, put my yoke on. Take my yoke on, for I'm gentle and I'm humble in heart." And he says this, "You'll find rest for your souls." That's twice, right? And then he says this, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And I said, "Lord, I got a problem. Because I've been doing this a long time, and if there's anything that I know, I don't know a lot, but if there's anything I know, I've been doing this Christian life thing a long time, and here's what I know. I know that the yoke has not been easy, and the burden has not been light." Anybody else know what I'm talking about? And I said, "Lord, there's one of two problems here. Either that word is no longer relevant today. It was written 2,000 years ago. And it's no longer relevant to today and to me. Or I don't understand something." Now, which one do you think it was? You know which one it was. And then I made this statement. I'll never forget, I was at my happy place, where I deer hunt in the fall and pray in the summer. Okay? So I was at my happy place. I said, "God, I got a problem. It's not easy. It's not light." And then I said this statement. "God, I just can't live the Christian life." And I'm talking about in my 40s. God, I just can't live the Christian life. You see, I admitted that I needed change, didn't I? I finally admitted that I needed change. And not only did I have to admit it, but when I made that statement, here's what else I admitted. I admitted this, that I was powerless to change myself. Right? What I say, "God, I can't live the Christian life. I've tried all my life. Ever since I was 16, God, 15, actually, I gave my life to you. I tried to live for you, God. And here's what I figured out after 25 or 30 years of doing that. Here's what I figured out, God. I'm just being real with you. I'm being honest with you. God, I can't live the Christian life. And not only that, I'm powerless to change myself because I've tried and tried and tried. And let me tell you something. Some of you, this is what's neat about this. Some of you are here today. And some of you who are here today, you need to admit this. You need to admit that you are carrying a heavy burden right now, right? I mean, you're carrying a heavy burden. You're carrying worry. You're carrying a lot of discouragement, depression. You're scared to death of what might happen. You've got a lot of doubt. You've got a lot of uncertainty. And if I were to ask you if the burden is light or the yoke is easy, and if you were to be transparent with me or God, you would say what? It's not. And you've got to answer the same question I had to answer. God, either that doesn't apply to the generation today, or there's something I don't get. Right? That's the only two options. And you know what it is. And it seems like you're going through all this, and every day your life gets more miserable all the time. And let me tell you what you and I need to do. We need to begin the 12-step process. Because, see, all the recovery have these 12 steps, right? In fact, here are the first 3 steps. I want to talk about that. Here are the first 3 steps that every AA attender repeats to begin their recovery process. Okay? Some of you right now probably in AA. And here's the 3 steps that you repeat if you're in AA or in AA. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Right? Step number 2. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Number 3. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand it. Right? That's what every recovery process does. Well, what about this Christian thing? What about the change that you and I need to make in this Christian thing? What about the rehab that we need to go through for our own lives to change in this Christian thing? Where do I start? What do I need to do? Well, let me tell you. You need to do exactly the same thing. So here's step number 1. Step number 1, Christians Anonymous, step 1, all right? We admitted we were powerless over our Christian lives and that our lives had become unmanageable. Okay? See it? Let's read it again. That we admitted we were powerless. Let me tell you, that's what I did. That's what I did. I admitted that I was powerless over my Christian life and that my life had become unmanageable. And here's how Paul put it in Galatians chapter 2:20. He said, I've been crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live. I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Once again, I'm powerless. Does a dead man have any power whatsoever? Unable to manage his own life. We admitted we were powerless over our Christian lives and that our lives had become unmanageable. So what did Paul say? I'm crucified. I'm dead. And I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. That's step number 1, is admitting that we need to change, right? What about step number 2? Christians Anonymous, step number 2. We came to believe that the power of God in us could restore us to sanity. Now I love this verse right here. I'm going to spend a little time on it. Here's what it says. It says, for in him, and that's Jesus, in him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily, and you are complete in him. Okay, now if you ain't heard nothing else I've said, wake up right now, and this is, you need to hear this, okay? in Him, in Jesus, dwells all of the fullness of the Godhead bodily. Okay? Everything, every part of God was in Jesus. You get it? Okay? Every part of God was in Jesus. And he says, and you, me, Paul was talking to the Colossian church, and you are complete in Him. Okay? All of God was in Jesus, and Jesus says, if you have Jesus, Paul says, you are complete in Him. You're complete. You have everything you need. Okay? Let me ask you something. Anybody ever built a house or remodeled a house and still stayed married afterwards? Oh man. Let me tell you something. Listen up. Let me tell you what happens when you build a house. The first thing you do is you buy a piece of land, right? You buy a piece of land and you begin to clear that land. And when you begin to, and after you clear that land, you get it ready, you look at all these books and you pick out a house plan, right? You pick out a house plan. You can, in that book, you can order the material list for that house plan, right? Okay? I've got my land. I've picked out, my wife's picked out a house. And a material list for that house, right? And we take that material list to the building supply company. You with me? That's the way it happens. We take that list to the building supply company, and what they do is they make a material list, or they look at that materials list, and then they say, and you say, all right, we've got it all together, and where do we deliver it to? And you tell them where you want to deliver it to, and they take all of that, the house, the material list, everything to build that house, and they take it onto your property and they dump it out, right? And in so many words, that person who dumps all that material on your property, he says this: here's your house. Right? Here's your house. And you look at it like, well, it's not exactly the way I pictured it. But let me ask you something. Is that your house? Of course it's your house. It's not put together, but it's your house. And then what you do is you come and you hire a builder or a contractor, and they come in and they begin to take the material list and build what you see and the house that you have wanted and dreamed about. So let me tell you what God does when in our life when we become a Christian. When you and I become a Christian, let me tell you what He does. First of all, He clears the land. That is actually becoming a Christian. When you and I decide to become followers of Christ, remember what Jesus told told Nicodemus in the book of John. John wrote about it. He said to Nicodemus, you've got to be born again. And let me tell you what He said. He said, and Nicodemus said, what are you talking about, born again? He said, can a man go back into the womb? He said, no. He said, what I mean, Jesus said, what you mean is a man has to be born of the Spirit, or born of water and of the Spirit. And when he's talking about water, he's talking about what happens when a baby is born. Water breaks. Okay? You got to be born of water and of the Spirit. He said, you're born again. Because when you and I are born again, God wipes out all of our sins. Okay? What does He do? He clears the land. All that other junk you've dealt with, it's gone, it's past, it's over. So He clears the land when you and I become a follower of Christ. And then He has a plan for my life, doesn't He? Your house and my house will look different. Everybody has a different house. He has a plan for exactly how He wants to make you and build you. And what He does is He dumps everything you will ever need in your life to become the person He has made you to be. He dumps it in your life. Why? How do I know that? Because once again, Paul said, and you are complete in Him. You're complete in Him. He dumps everything you need and I need. When you and I become a Christian, everything, He dumps it in our life. You say, well, man, I tell you what, it don't look. Well, let me tell you what happens next. He puts a builder in your life and my life called the Spirit of God. And for the rest of your life, He's building the person He's designed you and me to be. That's step 2. Because we have to first believe that the power of God in us can restore us to sanity. We admit we've got a problem. Those things in our life that we can't move, can't get rid of. God, I need some help. And we realize we have to believe that the power of God in us could restore us to sanity. That's step 2. And then step 3. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood it. Right? Remember that verse again? Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Let me tell you, the greatest day in my life was when I learned that the Christian life was not a work, it was a rest. And that's not a sermon, guys. I promise you it's not a sermon. And the reason I know that was so important to me because it changed my life, and I've never been the same since that day. Because I come to believe that verse was good for me. And if I wasn't resting, and if the burden was too heavy, then it was something that I forgot, not something that was irrelevant to who God was today.
What's that?
And you know, and that's why that I like this place to be encouraging. Because what I've been able to enjoy for the last few years is a Christian life that I never knew. Because I learned to rest. And I realized that I couldn't live the Christian life. And I can remember the words seemingly audibly, but it wasn't, when the Lord said to me in my spirit, said, Gary, you never had to. It's not up to you to live the Christian life. I'm crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I. But Christ lives in me, and the life I now live, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. So is anybody ready to do this? Here are those 3 things, real quick. I'm closing. Here's the Christian recovery 3 steps. We can go all 12 of them, but we're doing 3 steps. All right. I admit I'm powerless over my Christian life, and that my life has become unmanageable. Step number 2. I believe the power of God in me can restore me to sanity. Number 3. I'm deciding to turn my will and my life over to the care of God through Jesus Christ. All right. Now, you know I don't do this much. You don't want to do this? Don't do it. It's okay. It's okay. I'll still love you. Whatever. But anybody ready to do this? Let's do this together. You ready? Let's read this together. Will you, if you want to? All right, number 1. I admit I am powerless over my Christian life, that my life has become unmanageable. That even feels good right there. Doesn't that feel good? Let's read it one more time. Let's do it with passion. I admit I'm powerless over my Christian life, that my life has become unmanageable. Number 2, ready? I believe the power of God in me can restore me to sanity. That's nothing you're doing, is it? Let me ask you something. Do you believe the power of God in you can restore anything in your life that he wants to restore? I'm not talking you into anything, am I? One more time, number 2. I believe the power of God in me can restore me to sanity. And number 3, I am deciding to turn my will and my life over to the care of God through Jesus Christ. Don't that feel good? Now I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. Again, we're all about change, right? A little different. Don't worry. I'm not going to call you out or do anything like that. But I'm going to ask you to do this. I'm going to ask you to bow your head and close your eyes. And I want you to repeat these now I'm going to tell you what to say. I just want you to repeat it, okay? If you want to. I admit I'm powerless over my Christian life. That my life has become unmanageable. I believe the power of God in me can restore me to sanity. I'm deciding to turn my will and my life over to the care of God through Jesus Christ. Amen. Now look up here. Now, let me tell you what happened. If you meant that, I hope you didn't say any of those words because I made you, because you wouldn't have done that anyway. But let me tell you what happened. There's one or two things if you did, if you prayed that. And if you really meant that, whether your eyes were closed, it doesn't matter. But you know if you meant it or not. Let me tell you something. If you meant that, one of two things happened. It might have been that if you prayed that, you really meant that. It might have been that you just made a decision to become a follower of Jesus Christ. Isn't that neat? That if you just said, I'm deciding to turn my will and my life over to the care of God through Jesus the Christ, then it might be that you just now became a follower of Jesus Christ. And if you did that, you really meant it. Let me tell you what else happened. God just cleared your slate. Cleared the land. All that other stuff gone. And He, in a split second, just put within you a builder called the Spirit of God. And not only did He do that, but He put everything in your life. One fatal time. You feel a little heavier? Everything you need to be who God made you to be. Everything you need for the Holy Spirit to take out those things in your life that He wants to take out. And to put in those things in your life that He wants to put in. None of your business, none of your effort. It's all Him. I'm crucified. That's pretty neat. That's what happened. You say, well, what's my next step? If that happened. Your next step is being baptized. And then what? Is that it? No, it ain't it. But let me tell you what to do. It's easy. It's good. Just start getting to know God. You say, well, I just don't understand the Bible. Well, don't read the Bible. Oh, my goodness. Did I say that? Well, let me explain. You know, there's plenty of people that's written a lot of good books that can explain what the Bible says. Just get you a book and start reading what somebody else. It's like listening to a sermon, isn't it? Start reading what somebody says about God. And then get your little Bible over there and say, well, yeah, right there's where He said it. Don't worry about the do's and don'ts. Just get to know God. Rest. Right? Then if you prayed that as a Christian, let me tell you what you need to do. And you really meant it. You need to allow God to give you the rest that He promised. You need to quit taking up the burden and the yoke and wrestling. And let God build trust in you. Because it's supposed to be a rest, not a work. And what's your next step? Just keep learning all you can about God. Last thing. The 12th step in AA says this. This is AA. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. What about the Christian Anonymous? Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of those steps, I'll try to carry this message to other people who need rest from their labor and who need their burden lifted. That's pretty good. And you know what? Everybody here can do that. You say, you know what? I don't know the theology. I don't know all the how-to. But I do know this, that I learned that Christianity was a rest. And that if I did it right, the burdens would be lifted. And I'd rest from my labor. And I want you, and I promise you people, I promise you, as the guy who's standing right here, I want that for you. If I never see you again, I promise you, I want it for you. Never wanted it any more than I've ever wanted it right now. I know how hard it is. And I know how it is when you don't do it right. And I know some of you young people are going to quit on me. And you're going to quit on God if you don't get it right. Because if it is a rest, and if the burden is lifted, I promise you, it will be impossible for you to leave the faith if you get it right. Lord, thank you for these folks. I love the heck out of them. And you know I want the best for them. And I miss them when I'm not here, when they're not here. And I'm convinced that Christianity is not a truth, it is the truth. It's so different from anything else. But I also know that the devil, and he's real, he will try to counterfeit it. He'll try to compromise it in order to get us away from it. Help us to admit that we need change. And admit the only way that it can happen is if we admit our powerlessness and the ability of God to do it in us. And if there's somebody here today that made a decision to become a follower of Jesus Christ, that they would tell me before they leave here. If somebody's never been baptized, that they come and tell me I want to be baptized. If somebody says, you know, I need to learn more about God, they tell me that sign up for a starting point class, whatever it is. And I thank you and I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Appreciate y'all coming.